Committee to order. I'd like to see a motion to approve the minutes from our last meetings. And I can't tell if anyone has their hands up or not. I'm sorry about that. Supervisor Dickinson, thank you. A second? Shout out. Supervisor Hogan, thank you. You're getting your hands up here today. All in favor of approving of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Aye.
That is passed. Okay, moving forward. Liza, can we talk about your motions today?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I have a few resolution requests this morning. The first item on the agenda is appointing our final seat on the Workforce Development Board. And we have a nomination to appoint Mr. Ash Anand of the Lotus Group.
Can I have a motion to bring this to the floor?
Bring it to the floor.
Thank you, Supervisor. In a second, Supervisor Hogan. Any discussion? Supervisor Hogan.
I want to thank Liza and her team for your extra efforts, going the extra mile to find somebody who understands the challenges within the park. I wholeheartedly support.
The dog does too, I guess. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to call a motion for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion's passed. Liza? We'll let the dogs out. Liza, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. The second item on the agenda is to amend my budget. So I believe this is the first time the budget's gone before this committee. Since previous years we were under Human Services. Our program year starts July 1st, 30th. So in the summer, we get our Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funds for the program year of 2020. And then we also received our OTDA TANF funds for the Summer Youth Employment Program. So the second item is to request to amend my budget to include the updated funds.
So what we need to do is have a motion to bring this to the floor.
Still move.
Thank you, Dennis. Second?
Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Brad. Any discussion on this? Supervisor Leggett? Craig, you're muted.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liza, the budget that's in our package, is there anything in particular? Do the changes show up in here from one to another? And where is that?
Yeah, I wanted to go over it with you guys. I did send an updated document last night. I'm not sure if you all have received it, but I can also share it on the screen. I checked with the deputy treasurer, and he wanted to make sure that I had all of the account codes listed, that would be needed for the resolution. So I forwarded to the chair and the clerk the updated budget with the account codes. But there are a couple things I wanted everybody to be aware of. So from last year to this year, program year 19 to 20, we did take a 20% budget cut. We lost $127,000. But the reason I am not worried and do not want you to worry about it is because we're also able to carry in $111,000 from program year 19. Now we do have to spend that by the end of October, so it's not included in the PY20 budget because it's program year 19. But the fact that we're able to carry over that $111,000 for our summer spending, also with the TANF money, and then we still have a contract with social services for $98,000 of reimbursements. And they are renewing that in October, the deputy commissioner informed me, and for the same amount of $98,000. So I'm not worried about the $127,000 budget cut from last year to this year for those reasons, because of the partnerships, because of the carryover, and because of the TANF money as well. but I'm happy to answer any other questions. The other thing that will be an expense this year that is long overdue is that I had IT come visit, and we are overdue for computer upgrades. The software updates are not enough. Our hardware cannot support the software updates, so we will have to invest a little bit more money into our computer upgrades this year.
Any other questions? Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liza, are you worried about the funding cut going into future years, extending just past this one?
You know, it's hard to predict what the economy will do. But given that, you know, we work in workforce development and there's been record unemployment, I'm optimistic that there will be more funding for these workforce programs through the WIOA grant, but also other grants. But it's hard to predict given these economic circumstances.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That is carried. Liza, any discussion items?
Yes, but actually, if I may, I had one item come to my attention this morning that I want from the purchasing department that I wanted to bring to the floor, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. So I hired a new employment coordinator who started June 1st. I have paused on hiring a part-time office specialist, which you all approved in February for me to hire, but I'm going to let that expire until we return to open to the public and see how everything's going. But given that I had somebody retire this past winter, I had a new coordinator and I'm a new director, it was very important to me that I did some staff development this summer. And so we did, with an existing partner, we did some staff development in July. And I made sure that the WIOA grant would help cover it. I talked to the Albany office, but I failed to make sure that this committee was okay with it for basically as attending a meeting. So I'm requesting permission to submit the meeting authorization
So moved.
to pay for the vendor.
Second.
Moved in second already. That was quick. Any discussion? Seeing none. Thank
I'll
you.
just say that that's really great that she's going forward with development for her staff, and I fully support that. I understand you made a little mistake there, Liza. Understandable. Still trying to get everything, understanding all of the procedures at the county. So I appreciate you coming back to us for that approval, and I wholeheartedly support that. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Bramer.
And there was a saying when I was gainfully employed, one atta girl makes up for a couple of oh no's. So Liza, you're still on the positive, so don't worry about it, right?
Thank you.
So if I could call a vote, all in favor, if we need to do that. I'm seeing a bunch of yeses and hands.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed.
Thank you, and I'll make sure the clerk has the updated documents. Finally, I just wanted to share some updates around employment and what we've been working on with the committee. So the July unemployment numbers are scheduled to be released today for our county and our region. I checked this morning on the labor's website and they're not there yet, but I will keep checking throughout the day to see what our July numbers were and if they kept going down, which is our hope and prayer. I did receive authorization from Department of Labor to have my staff return to the office at 50%. They were okay with my safety plans, which I was very happy with. I do still have 2 employment counselors working at the DSS office at 50% time while we have appointments with social service referrals through the month of September at least. So I'm excited that my staff, that I'm seeing them more and that they're back in the office. And we have been, keeping track of what everybody's been working on, even when they're working remotely. I know that was a concern of Supervisor McGowan's, and I just wanted to make sure that that everybody knows that my staff submit that information to me daily. I'm chairing a hospitality workforce subcommittee, with some other leaders, and we are focusing on the short-term and long-term hospitality workforce challenges, and maybe developing a pipeline in partnership with SUNY Adirondack and some other partners in the community to make sure that we can fill our hospitality jobs every season and annually, and try to get more young people interested as well in the hospitality field. So that group just started last week. We'll have our second meeting today. We administered or distributed a survey to businesses the last few weeks to see what their current workforce challenges and skill gaps are. That will also help us prioritize what our focus is and how we're filling those gaps for our local businesses. That is disaggregated by industry too, so that's very helpful. And then currently we have another survey out to the public about which virtual workshops they're interested in, so that we can spend our time focusing on the most valuable virtual workshops for the community. Although we've been able to operate, 90% remotely, we're not able to have our workshops and classes, everything from resume updating to preparing for interviews to transferable skills. And so working with the Capital Region Career Centers, we meet every week. We decided to offer virtual workshops to our entire Capital Region. That way we can offer more types of workshops from more experts to a broader population. So we're very excited about that. That survey is live now. And I want to publicly thank Don Lehman for continuing to push out anything I need communicated with the public. And then finally, we're still trying to make sure businesses stay open. And I've shared at a few other meetings that we have local consultants and partners who are ready to help businesses figure out their continuity plans, figure out how to be successful with working remotely. But many of the businesses cannot afford to pay for the consultants. So we have some things in the works, but we still need more support in finding funding to help businesses stay afloat. I am in touch with the Regional Planning Board and hopeful that we'll be able to do some work to cover those costs with them. So really it's a 2-for-1. We're supporting local consultants, which are businesses, while also helping other businesses survive. I'm happy to answer any other questions about anything I may not have shared today or anything I have shared.
Thank you, Liza. And for the committee, Liza is on the Economic Recovery Task Force, and she's been recognized as a go-getter in making things happen. So she's an asset not only to the county, but to our business community as a whole. Thank you, Liza, again. And if I could just interject on Thursday's task force meeting, can you bring this up in terms of having funding to helping these businesses survive? Let's see if we can get Jason from Congresswoman Stefanik's office keyed into that and see if we can maybe shake some money loose in the next stimulus package that comes out of the feds. Any other questions or comments for Liza? Seeing none. Don, do we have any from the public?
No, Chairman Weil, at this point, no comments on YouTube.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to close this session and open up the planning discussion. And I see Sarah. I'm not sure if Wayne is on.
No Wayne, no Wayne today.
No Wayne today. So we have Sarah and Chris. So
Yep.
I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Okay. We don't have any action items for this month, but we do have a couple updates on different topics for you. So Chris is going to start us off with giving an update on solar energy.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for asking me to come on, Chairman Wild. Sarah and I coordinate a group called the Warren County Planning Group. Meets every couple months and discusses different issues affecting land use. We get local planners, zoning administrators, and code officers together to talk about these things. And so last month we chatted about solar, which based on the previous meeting, sounds like a pretty relevant topic. But some of the things that came out of this meeting though, was that there's gonna be a real demand for installing solar energy systems around the state, between some recent policies that were passed, as well as programs at the state level. So In Warren County, in the past 10 years, we've seen roughly 600 new solar projects. That's just in the last 10 years. And then last year, the state passed the nation's most ambitious climate targets. They're seeking to have a capacity for 6,000 megawatts of solar generation within the next 5 years. In the next 10 years, they have a goal of having 70% renewable energy generation, and then 100% renewable within the next 20 years. The consideration that our group had is on land use, and so given that the state has is having this big push for installing clean energy to meet those targets, we looked at our local land use codes, and out of the 11 communities that have zoning, only 3, soon to be 4, address solar specifically in their codes. So we're going to be putting together some guidelines, some model legislation, and sharing that with our group. But there's certainly some things to be concerned about, to be proactive about, to reduce issues between neighbors and so on, including setback restrictions, decommissioning, and then also different types of solar systems being installed in certain areas. These systems can require a lot of space. NYSERDA estimates about 10 acres per megawatt of generation. So I think the lesson that we learned from our meeting the other day was just that we need to make sure all of our communities are ready for what's to come.
Thank you, Chris. Any comment from the committee? Questions? Chris, I do. Storage is going to be a big issue. I've read something recently about California with their brownouts and blackouts because of their lack of generation, especially at night, because solar goes away and they don't have the capacity to deal with it with their, let's call it fossil fuel generation. Have we given any consideration to storage? And also, who might be driving that to get storage here in Warren County?
That's not a consideration we had. We had 2 guest speakers. We had somebody from Apex Solar to talk about permitting and their experiences with permitting. We also had somebody on to talk about community solar. So we had a lot of questions with regard to those things, but we didn't get into the storage. But certainly, based on your comment, definitely take a look at it, and if it's applicable, share that information with the communities as well.
Yeah, I think we probably want something like that if we're going to do community solar also, right? To be able to back up anything else that might be going on. Any other questions or comments for Chris? Seeing none, thank you, Chris. Stay on top of it and kind of keep us up to date as things move forward, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Sarah.
Okay, so I gave everybody a 2-minute update on census at the full board meeting on Friday. Thank you for that opportunity. Now I'm going to just spend a little bit more time going into a little bit more detail about what's happening with the census, both at the national level and here locally in Warren County, as we kind of get to the crunch time here. So I am going to have a brief PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to switch over to that. Can everybody see that?
Yes, Sarah, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so first of all, just a quick reminder about why the census is important. Our reapportionment of the House of Representatives, how many representatives we have in the House of Representatives, is determined by the census count. New York is projected to lose 2 seats in the House of Representatives. Obviously, it would be great if that didn't happen. We don't want it to be any more than 2. But this data is also used to redistrict all the way through both the state level and locally. So after we get census counts, we'll redistrict the local towns, depending on population counts. And also this will likely change the weighted votes for the County Board of Supervisors. So it is important for representation all the way from very local up to the federal level.
Good morning, how you doing? The new case that you guys had as of yesterday afternoon, no real word on where this person kind of came.
Hey, Don, can you go on mute?
Okay. The other thing, of course, is the huge amount of federal funding that is distributed based on population counts. In 2016, there was about $275 billion in federal funding distributed nationwide. The most recent figures for 2019 are substantially higher than that, probably over $800 billion. Just doing some basic math, that kind of evens out to about $3,000 per person in New York State over a 10-year period. If we had a 1% undercount, which is only about 650 people not being counted, that will result in us losing about $20 million over the decade until the next census. So it's a huge amount of money at stake for many programs that are really vitally important for our community. Here's where we are with self-response rates as of a couple days ago. The dark blue figures are the 2010 response rates. The white figures are our current self-response rates. So I want to note that these are the self-response rates. They don't include the figures from the enumerators who are now out in the field collecting data directly from people by going to their doors. Those are just being tracked on the state level. And as of yesterday, about 12% of households in New York State had data collected by an enumerator in person. So as we can see, all of the towns in the county, with the exception of Lake Luzerne, are behind the 2010 response rate, self-response rate. So why are our response rates lower this time around? There's no official answer to this from the Census Bureau. So this is basically just my feelings and some research discussions with other people who are involved in census response. Obviously, first and foremost, the pandemic has interrupted the census. People are much more distracted, especially at the beginning of the census period. It coincided with the beginning of shutdown in New York and then subsequently around the rest of the country. So response rates just lagged from the beginning because of the unfortunate timing. In our case, we have a large portion of our population who had hand-delivered census materials. Those materials were late to arrive in many of the towns in the county because that hand delivery operation was delayed. So again, that kind of put us behind the 8 ball. We had a pretty large percentage of the population who didn't even have any communication from the Census Bureau. Also, typically during the census year, there's a lot of outreach activities. There's lots of events. There's big parties on Census Day, lots of themed events taking place around the community. All of those were canceled this year because of the pandemic. I think one thing that has changed dramatically between 2010 and 2020 is an increased distrust in the government. That distrust is reflected in the Facebook comments we receive on our social media posts. People are just very wary. The country is much more divided politically than it was in 2010, and trust in government overall has decreased. So people are wary about responding to the census. And also, I'm not really sure how great a role this has played in Warren County, and I'd like to do a little bit more research about this and possibly report back on it later, but we have had an increase in seasonal housing. So those response rates, the denominator for determining the response rate is the full universe of housing units. So in towns where a large percentage of housing units are seasonal, the response rates are going to inherently be lower than in communities with a smaller percentage of seasonal residents. I think that countywide, the number of seasonal residents is likely to have increased between 2010 and 2020, which has depressed the appearance of our response rates, but not necessarily the response rates of our year-round residents. So that makes comparing apples to apples a little bit difficult. Okay, so here's where we are as far as the timeline. We're towards the end of August here. You may have noticed enumerators are in the field. They started field activities August 11th. And I have not been able to get an exact number of enumerators in Warren County from the Census Bureau, but my guess is that we have several dozen enumerators working throughout the county. Self-response can continue, so people can continue to self-respond to the census all the way through the end of the data collection period on September 30th. So if they don't want an enumerator coming to their house, which many people don't, most people don't, they can respond online via phone or by sending the questionnaire back in the mail. We're trying to get this message out as well via social media and other methods, that if people do not want an enumerator showing up at their house, their best option is to respond to the census themselves. Also this month and next month, there'll be counting of group quarters. So nursing homes, other locations where people are living in a group. The Census Bureau comes to those locations and enumerates them. They've also been doing that virtually as well. The Census Bureau will send out another reminder mailing to non-responding households sometime this month or early next month. I wasn't able to get an exact date on when that mailing will go out, but it should be sometime in the next couple of weeks. And then mobile questionnaire assistance centers. These are basically a census booth that's set up at a location that is invited. So if an event is happening, the host of the event can invite the Census Bureau to set up a mobile questionnaire assistance center. They'll provide enumerators and people can come to that location and respond to the census at the location without having an enumerator come to their house. So we have been working to try to get local organizations to host mobile questionnaire assistance centers. They have to be invited. They can't, the Census Bureau just won't set it up on their own. So a couple weekends ago at the event in Crandall Park to commemorate the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, some of you, I think, were in attendance at that event. We had a mobile questionnaire assistance center set up there with a couple of enumerators. Last week and this week, we've also had mobile questionnaire assistance centers set up at the Open Door Mission during their food pantry. So people coming to pick up food bags, visit the food pantry, will also be able to respond to the census at one of those mobile questionnaire assistance centers. We're strongly encouraging any towns or local organizations who have an interest in hosting one of these to please get in touch. I think the more of these that we can get set up, the better. So all of those things will be continuing on through September with the addition of the Census Bureau making phone calls for enumeration. So this is a new program, has not historically happened, but because of the time crunch and the moving up of the census response period by a month to September 30th instead of October 31st, the Census Bureau will be making phone calls to enumerate non-responders. So if your constituents are call with a concern about somebody calling them from the Census Bureau, it's not a scam. I'll share the number that people can call to double check and make sure that it's a legitimate call. The Census Bureau also will be sending reminder emails. So they're using many methods to reach out and try to get people to respond. And then December 31st, the apportionment counts will be delivered to the president. So this will be the counts that determine how many seats each state will get in the House of Representatives, with additional data to follow. over the course of 2021. Okay, so our hard to count populations. Young children historically are more difficult to count. We've done a lot of outreach focused on making sure that children are fully counted in the 2020 census. One piece of good news, we have partnered with Family Services Association of Glens Falls, which serves many low-income families throughout the region. They've done a ton of outreach. We've provided a banner for them to put out front. They've posted regularly on social media. They have provided materials through the food pantry. They have contacted many of their client families and asked them if they've responded to the census, and a huge percentage of those families that are served by Family Services Association have responded to the census. In fact, in a recent survey of 100 families, only 4 had not responded to the census. So we feel that our big push to reach young children has been fairly successful, at least in that one circumstance. Seasonal, obviously our seasonal population is difficult. It makes life difficult for the enumerators because they're spending a lot of time going to houses that are seasonal. So it takes time away from finding the year-round residents. We have been helping some of them use the GIS data to try to get a handle on which residents are seasonal, which assists them in their enumeration process. Our elderly population, we have a growing elderly population. As you can see, the percentage of our population that's elderly has increased about 5% since 2000. So we've been making efforts through Office for the Aging and many of our other outreach activities to try to reach this elderly population and give them alternatives to responding to the census besides the online alternative, the online option, which many of them feel less comfortable with. And finally, our rural population, just in general, the rural population is less likely to respond to the census, and places with a lower self-response rate. So that's areas where people are not returning their census questionnaire, not calling to complete the census, or not going online to complete the census. Historically, those areas have had less accurate counts overall. And I think probably some of you in the rural towns have experienced that fact. I know there was some consternation about the 2010 census figures not being accurate. We're in the same situation here with 2020. So the more we can get people to self-respond, the better our count is going to be. We have had an increase in immigrant communities of color. Open Door has been working specifically with these populations. We've done quite a bit of outreach through Open Door in these wards, specifically in Glens Falls, that have had increased immigrant communities. We have materials in Spanish that we've been able to distribute. And renters historically have a lower response rate. They're historically undercounted. We can see that playing out in real time here in Warren County. Those census tracts that you can see on that map there in Glens Falls and Queensbury all have had over 50% renter population in the 2010 census, and those census tracts all have a lower response rate than their surrounding census tracts in Glens Falls and Queensbury. Wards 1 and 4 have the lowest response rates in Glens Falls. They're in the 50% response rate zone versus 60 or over for the other tracts in Glens Falls. So we're focusing our outreach activities specifically in some of these areas in Glens Falls and Queensbury with lower response rates. So here's what we are doing as part of our outreach activities. We've partnered with Tri-County United Way. The funding that we received from the state required that 75% of those funds be utilized by a partner nonprofit, and thankfully Tri-County United Way volunteered, and they are doing a ton of work. Kathy Tolstrup has been working very diligently for the past couple of weeks to get up and running with these major activities. So their two major outreach activities are setting up census booths at all of the Warren County Farmers Market and at the Shirt Factory Food Corral. So they did the farmers market in Bolton last week, and they'll be doing half a dozen farmers markets this week. These are all on our website, warrencountycensus.com. You can check the schedule and where they'll be. They'll be distributing we're getting some PPE with Warren County Counts and the census logo on them to encourage people to visit the booth. They'll have tablets on hand where people can respond to the census, get assistance if they need it. They're also hosting a census phone bank. So they're using phone lists that from their organization as well as other partner nonprofit organizations to call people and remind them to respond to the census. They can assist over the phone with walking through somebody responding online or to the paper questionnaire and answer any questions. So they've started that this week, and so far they have had a number of conversations with people, some of whom had not yet responded to the census. They were able to answer questions. So they'll be continuing this all the way up through September 30th, and we're hoping that this will be a successful outreach activity. And I think having that personal connection hopefully will go a long way towards increasing our response rate. Also, they'll be sending out bulk emails to local organizations and employers, encouraging them to, in turn, send that email out to all of their employees. So we're hoping we can get these bulk emails sent out via employers throughout the county. I sent everybody an email, all of the supervisors an email with details about this bulk email. So we'd like to encourage you to send those out yourselves and pass them on to employers that you may have relationships with. So in addition to those, again, I mentioned the mobile questionnaire assistance centers. We're continuing to work to try to find other locations to host these. We have some signs. So we have banners for the town halls that are being produced, and we'll provide those to each of the towns. They look like that image there on the left. They're set up for you to post out front of your town hall to set up. They set up with a couple pieces of conduit. So we'll be delivering those to each of the town halls, and we're hoping that you can get your DPW staff to set those up as a good reminder for people driving by. We had 100 additional lawn signs with a different design created, and Amanda, Chris, and I will be distributing those around the county over the course of the next few days. And if anybody would like to take a few to distribute in your own town, just let us know and we can get them to you. Chris has also been working with various fire departments and other entities around the school districts around the county to display a message on their digital signs. So you may see those pop up in various locations throughout the county. We also have a couple hard copy. We have another 4x9 card that will be distributed via meal deliveries to our elderly population and to school children. And then Glens Falls Housing Authority will be distributing another flyer to all of their residents in their properties. Social media, we're continuing our social media campaign. We are going to have 8 testimonials from local community members. This includes Jamie Schrammel from Glens Falls Fire Department, Chris Duffy from SUNY Adirondack. We got Kathy Naftali, who's the director of Crandall Library, a number of other community members who are providing a brief quote about why responding to the census is important, and then some additional information about how people can respond. So those will be pushed out as an ad to all Facebook and Instagram users in Warren County. In addition to that testimonial series, we're also doing call to action. So get people, fired up to respond to the census. And then we're also providing some posts with just basic census information. Why should people respond to the census? What does it do for us? So we're doing 3 posts a week that are boosted between started last week all the way through the end of the census response period, September 30th. We're also doing traditional media, so you may have seen articles or interviews in North Country Public Radio, Post Star, Sun Community News recently, and then we're doing ads as well in the Post Star, the Chronicle, and Sun Community News. And we have had response to these. I've gotten a number of calls from people who said that they hadn't received census materials in the mail and they hadn't been aware of it until they saw the newspaper, the ad, or they saw the article or ad in the newspaper or heard on the radio. So those methods have proved to be effective. So here's a few things that the supervisors can do to help. One thing, New York has started a campaign to ask 10 acquaintances if they've responded to the census. If not, encourage them to respond, and then you can ask other people to take this challenge as well. So we've posted this on our social media. We encourage everybody to participate in this challenge. You might be surprised. I have a number of friends who I thought are socially responsible members of the community. I've mentioned the census to them and they've said, oh, I totally forgot about that. So because of the timing, again, with the census questionnaires being mailed right at the time when we were shutting down, I think in many cases it got shoved to the side and was not forefront in people's minds. So a quick reminder can go a long way. Again, please hang the banner that we're going to provide you at your town hall. You can also, if you have a digital message board at your town hall, you can post a reminder there. We have some wording and some graphics that we can provide to you. One thing that would be fantastic is to host a mobile questionnaire assistance center at your town hall or another location where people are visiting. We know that many of the town halls are still closed, but if your town hall is open or there's another location in the town that you know people are visiting, being willing to assist to host a mobile questionnaire assistance center would be fantastic. If you're interested in that, please reach out to me and I can give you details about that. Bring the census up at your town hall meeting or any other meeting that you're attending. Just a few words about the fact that the census is happening, that our response rate is lagging, that people need to respond. It can go a long way. Also, I sent out an email with a web banner, a custom web banner, Warren County Counts. We're asking people to post those on their town websites. If you need another copy of that, just let me know and I can get it to you. And then finally, if you have an email mailing list or you have contacts, you have email mailing lists, large employers, small employers, the school district, your local fire department, sending a bulk email is a great reminder. And again, I sent an email out last week with information, with text and images for the bulk email, as well as how to send that out using a number of common email programs. You can also just copy and paste it right into Gmail or Outlook. Okay, that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm not sure if we have any other questions or comments. Mr. Lehman.
Kevin Gary in the boardroom. Do you know, are there any remunerators out in Warrensburg?
Yes, there are enumerators out in every town. So I have asked and not received information about how many are in each town. I know for a fact there are 3 in the town of Bolton, one of whom the town of Bolton is extremely lucky to get Deanne Ream as an enumerator. She has completed about 150 census questionnaires over the course of the last 10 days. So obviously she's familiar with the community and highly dedicated, but we have to imagine that you know, there are a comparable number of enumerators in each town, and hopefully they're having somewhat of the same level of success as Deanne.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, do you know if the United Way is mobile at the farmers market up here in Chester?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, they'll be attending the Chestertown Farmers Market this week.
And we did put your banner on our website. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Mr.
Supervisor-
Chairman,
Yes, Supervisor Conover.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, I couldn't agree with you more about your comment about our enumerators here in Bolton. Frankly, I think that in a very real way, we're really in the hands of those enumerators now in a very real way. And hopefully they have enough time to do what enumerators do, which is pick up the units that haven't responded. It occurred to me, though, that if you find out that any of the enumerators feel they could move more quickly if they had drivers, anybody that's been out getting signatures for anything realizes when you have to navigate and drive and follow a list, it slows your rate down. It's really helpful if you have somebody in the car that can really drive to wherever it is you have to go. It's also safer as well. So if you need any drivers here in Bolton, let me know. And the only other thing is that I would agree with you that I think that perhaps the new ingredient, we won't know till we get to census, as the number of households that are now devoted to non-residential use, whether seasonal or short-term, and what that change over the last 10 years has been. We may find it significant, more significant than maybe we realize. So I share that curiosity with you as well. And thank you for all of your efforts.
Anyone else for Sarah?
One more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that numerator, Sarah. The total housing units. And then I think there's assessments that codes there that would give you well, the numerator over the denominator. So what, is that something we can figure out town by town if I go down the hall to the assessor? And
So it's not super straightforward. So I have done rough calculations for each town, and I think I shared that with everybody via an email probably about 2 months ago. There is a code in RPS, in the assessor's database, for seasonal residents. However, it's not widely used. So typically that code is only used for something that is that does not have heating.
Right.
So you can't rely on that code to try to figure out the number of seasonal residents. The method that I have used, which is not 100% accurate, is looking at the property location versus the mailing address. So I pulled out all of the residential housing units, so anything that has a residential property code, and then I compared, I pulled out everything that has an address that's not local. However, using this method, we miss year-round renters, which in some communities is more significant than others. So probably that's going to have a smaller factor in the town of Bolton than it possibly may in the town of Queensbury. But it gives us a rough estimate as to what percentage of households are seasonal in each community. So again, I sent that out in an email a couple months ago, but if you'd like me to resend it, I'm happy to do that.
I'll look for it. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Sarah, I have a question. I'm gonna take a chance bringing this up primarily so that the committee members might scold me. But we have a presidential election coming, and we're a primarily Republican county. Could we do a little play on what if the Democrats win the presidency?
Are you kidding me? Get out of town.
Well, come on.
I'm serious. We need local people like that woman to really encourage people to fill out the census.
Well, how do we get those that are
Because
distrusting of the government, right?
then why are you going to throw the...
How about if Trump loses?
Oh my gosh, Mike, get out of town. Ask Sarah for some recommendations.
Well, I took a chance. I got a chuckle and a scolding, so I guess it wasn't a good idea.
That was kind of inappropriate. I'm gonna.
I was worried about that, but I figured I was with friends and they could scold me and it wouldn't be too bad. So, okay.
Just, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Sarah, so how many days do we have left that the enumerators are going to be out there? Did I see that through September?
Yeah, so about 41 days left.
Ron, the census ends September 31st.
Yeah, that really worried. I mean,
Yeah.
I really think that's what it's boiling down to. I think the advertising, we did, as you know, in Bolton, we did direct mail with our billings. We handed them out with our Mask Up Bolton information. We've had it on our internet site. But I think in the end, I think those, as it has been with almost every census, the enumerators are the ones that go from wherever you are on the filling out the form yourself to the final tally. And so having those enumerators out in the field as long as possible, doing what they're doing, that's going to be the key, I think.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the difficult thing about this is the moving up of the timeline to September 30th. So the enumerators that I've spoken to and the employees from the Census Bureau are convinced of the fact that they won't get a full count by September 30th. So that's why we're feeling that it's really critical to continue these other forms of outreach, doing the ads, doing the phone bank, doing the farmers market, even though they're less successful than the in-person enumeration. Given this reduced time frame, we need to do everything that we can because we're not going to get a complete count just relying on enumerators.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, going off of what Supervisor Conover had just said, will school districts be putting anything into their tax bill mailing that goes out here fairly soon?
We could definitely do that. So we're producing 5,000 additional 4x9 cards, similar to the 4x9 cards that we provided to any towns who wanted to include them in mailings. That is an individual school district decision because they have to physically include those in the mailing. In some cases, it's possible that it may increase the bulk mail rate, but we have cards that can be included in bulk mailings for anybody who would like to do that.
So we can reach out to the school districts and
Yes.
check with them. Thanks.
Yep.
Remind me again, when was this census supposed to end? And then why was it changed?
It was the original plan after the beginning of the pandemic changed the whole timeline for the census. So originally, if there had been no pandemic in play, the data collection period would have ended July 31st.
Okay.
It was extended to October 30th or October 31st, but then it was dropped back to September 30th. And the reason behind that is because President Trump wanted those apportionment counts while he was still in office.
Any other comments? Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the other thing about property tax bills is that property tax is paid by non-residents, and they go all over the place. Probably the best database we have of residency is to vote. You have to be a resident, right? So I would think that the election board, the lists at the election board would be a pretty good database, but my understanding on that is that they're not always up to date and they don't always include telephone numbers. Otherwise, what we could do is we could pull those lists and start calling, and then of course, then the question becomes, well, how do we get the telephone numbers? And that becomes an issue as well. But the voting lists are not a bad, is maybe the best database we have on residency.
For mailing, I would definitely agree with you. I have checked with Board of Elections, and they don't maintain accurate phone number lists, which is why we decided to do those phone banks I've reached out to a number of different organizations to try to make a phone bank happen during, this whole census outreach period. We have not been successful up until getting this grant funding from the state. And so we're using these nonprofit phone lists because the county does not have an up-to-date phone database. But thankfully, we were able to use, partner with these nonprofits and use their phone lists.
Chairman Weil.
Yes.
I had Councilman Clark send me a text message just now saying, what about a banner across Glen Street at the bank?
So we checked into that back at the beginning of the census response period, and it was booked for the entire year. So I guess that spot there books out very far in advance. So we will be providing a banner for the town hall or for City Hall to display out front of City Hall. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get that banner across
that particular spot. Okay.
Yeah, which we would have loved to, but.
Yeah, that was a great idea. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, I have to prolong this, but, we have an alert system for emergencies here in Bolton that people can sign up for. Now, that would include residents and non-residents can participate in that. But I was just wondering if there's some way, I'm just thinking out loud here, if the reverse 911 is a vehicle. I don't know, Sarah, if you've talked to Brian LaFleur about that, or.
I don't think that's legal.
Alrighty, and that ends that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will close the discussion. I'm going to open it up to any other comments or questions from the supervisors. Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the Economic Recovery Task Force one more time for coming up to the town of Johnsburg last week and listening to the businesses that their needs are as we're moving forward. But after thinking about it longer, I realized one thing that our smaller communities really truly need is an update to the infrastructure list that we started under Supervisor Conover when he was chairman. And to really focus on how we're going to use that as a tool to pick our way through these projects. I also would say that the planning department to be integral in that. But we need to revisit that. That was a really useful tool for us potentially, and something that our communities will benefit if we work on that. Thanks.
Thank you. If I could trouble Administrator Moore, I believe we just sent that out to Jim Simplan. Is it in need of an update, or can we get, I'm not sure if Supervisor Hogan has a copy, but what's the status of the infrastructure?
The capital infrastructure program.
Yes.
It was updated, I believe, in May or June for NISAC. So we have it. Sarah and Tammy are the primary keepers of that document.
So I can just provide a quick update on that. So yes, we did an update, kind of quick update to that for NISAC. But Tammy and I have also had a pretty detailed conversation about how we want to take this to the next phase, because when we collected the data initially, it was very apples and oranges. And we had projects that were fully funded through grant funding versus projects that were just very pie in the sky wish list types of projects. So we're realizing that the next phase of that project is separating things out into subcategories. And I began that project back in the spring, but it has gotten a little bit on the back burner with other things, COVID response and census and other projects, but it is definitely still on my list of things to do. And the plan is to have a web interface for this where people can review all of the projects in detail and summarize based on a variety of different criteria, search on different criteria. So I'll get back to it.
Yeah, do you know how long that might take and when we might expect it?
Maybe by the end of the year.
If that's the best we can do, Supervisor Hogan, does that satisfy your need? End of the year?
Well, I think it's the need of the entire county, but I also think we need to prioritize, and then our planners can focus on the priorities. Having a list isn't the end of the project.
Yes, so the plan is to kind of separate things out. So apples are with apples and oranges are with oranges, which will enable the decision makers to prioritize the projects. And I can, if it's the wish of the board, I can definitely move it up higher on my priority list and try to, get something to everybody sooner than the end of the year.
Do we have a priority vote from the committee? Is everyone in favor of moving this up or keeping the end of the year? Supervisor Hogan. Go ahead. Supervisor Hogan?
I just have a question before we engage in that discussion. Is it worth increasing the priority when there are no grant funds to be pursued anyway? That's a question for Sarah.
Is it worth moving it up in the priority list with no grant funds available? I don't know. Chris, do you have a thought about that? I mean, I think having a good inventory of our needs is always a good idea. It is true that there is no grant round this summer, so there will not be any grant funding available. I think having an inventory and knowing what planning studies we need to do puts us in a good position to have some of those studies completed and ready to go for the funding round for next year, for next summer. So I think it's still a good idea. Like, I don't think that this should completely just fall off the table because grant funds aren't available. I do think that there are things that we can still do to be ready for when grant funding does become available again.
If I might interject, my sense is being prepared is a good thing. And I think the prioritization between the different projects is going to take a little time.
Yes.
So as soon as we have that list, the better, because just from a timing standpoint, but that's just my opinion.
Well, sorry, I was going to mention, in a normal non-COVID year, we would begin the process, beginning to think about what projects we're going to be applying for funding for, January, February. So I think that the timing in terms of applying for funding opportunities could still be met. So that would be my 2 cents on it. I was confused though if the question from Supervisor Hogan was on infrastructure mapping or if it was on the capital improvement inventory that Sarah's been developing. Was that? Okay.
Capital.
Okay. Because I know Sarah and Amanda have done a ton of work with digitally mapping our infrastructure around the county and so on too. So, okay.
So any thoughts on prioritization or just leave it at the end of the year? Can I get a call? Just an informal vote. Anyone interested in moving up that priority? Say aye. That's quiet. So I guess we're going to keep it at the end of the year.
Sure.
So we're getting close to the end of our time slot. I did have a question for Don Lehman. Don, I know that we talked a couple of weeks ago about updating the Partnership for Recovery document. Do you have a status on that?
Yes, I've gotten submissions back from most everyone I have reached out to. I have not gotten a few from some of the key participants, which we can discuss at the committee meeting on Thursday if you would like.
That's fine, Don. Thanks. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are updating that document, what the timing was. So any other comments, questions, discussions? Don, anything on YouTube?
No, sir, nothing on YouTube.
Thank you. So hearing none, seeing no arms flailing, I'm going to call a vote or ask for a motion to adjourn. A motion?
I'll make that motion, Mike. It's Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Claudia. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time and your input.